Donald Trump posted 6 words on Truth Social that changed everything. 6 words that ended 85 days of war. 6 words that ended the largest oil supply shock in the history of the modern world. 6 words that ended the chokehold on the 21-mile waterway through which 20% of global oil trade flows every single day. Those 6 words were, an agreement has been largely negotiated. That was it. That was the announcement. Not a rose garden ceremony, not a joint press conference with Iran's foreign minister, not a signed document held up for cameras, a Truth Social post. 11 minutes of reading time for every oil trader, every shipping executive, every energy minister, every diplomat, every intelligence analyst in the world to process what those 6 words meant. And within those 11 minutes, Brent crude futures began to move. Within the hour, global oil markets were pricing in the end of the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Within the day, the most consequential diplomatic development in the Middle East since the Iran nuclear deal of 2015 was confirmed by CNBC, CNN, NPR, PBS, Fortune, Reuters, Times of Israel, and every major outlet on Earth. This is the story of how those 6 words got written. Who made them possible? What the deal actually says, what it still does not say. And why, despite the triumph of the announcement, the most important questions about this agreement remain completely unanswered. Because Trump said, largely negotiated. And the word largely is carrying more diplomatic weight right now than any other word in the English language. Let us start with what happened in the 48 hours before the post. Because the 6 words did not appear from nowhere. They are the product of the most concentrated burst of back-channel diplomacy in the entire 85-day war. A burst that began when Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir arrived in Tehran on Thursday, May 22nd, and ended when he left Tehran on Saturday, May 23rd, just hours before Trump posted. NPR, the Associated Press, and Reuters all confirmed the same basic facts. Munir met with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. The photograph, released by the Iranian Presidency Office, distributed by AP and published by every major outlet, shows Pezeshkian and Munir in conversation in Tehran on Saturday, May 23rd. Munir also met with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Parliament Speaker, and Chief Negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and other senior officials. State TV reported these meetings immediately after they concluded. And the signal that came out of those meetings, the signal that every Pakistani official, every Iranian official, and every regional diplomat was waiting for, was this. Pakistan's army confirmed that negotiations had resulted in encouraging progress. 2 Pakistani sources involved in the talks told Reuters the deal being negotiated is fairly comprehensive to terminate the war. And Iranian officials signaled narrowing differences, diplomatic language that, in the context of an 85-day conflict that has seen dozens of failed proposals, is the closest thing to a breakthrough that has been communicated from Tehran throughout this entire war. That signal traveled from Tehran to Islamabad to Washington within hours. And Trump, who had spoken by phone from the Oval Office with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and Bahrain, and separately with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, posted 6 words that, for the first time since February 28th, made the end of this war feel like a specific near-term event rather than a distant aspiration. The structure of the deal that is emerging from the negotiations, not yet finalized, not yet signed, but confirmed in its broad architecture by Iranian, Pakistani, American, and Qatari sources, is a 3-stage framework built around a memorandum of understanding as its first phase. Reuters was the first to report the structure with precision, and its account has been corroborated by multiple independent sources. Stage 1, formally ending the war. A cessation of hostilities that goes beyond the current ceasefire with violations that has been technically in place since April 8th, but has seen missile attacks on U.S. warships, U.S. self-defense strikes on Iranian ports, Iranian attacks on the UAE, and a U.S. naval blockade imposed on April 13th. A formal end to the war, not a ceasefire, but an actual end to hostilities, is Stage 1. Stage 2, resolving the Strait of Hormuz crisis, the mechanism through which Hormuz reopens, for which tankers, under whose management, and on what timeline. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei confirmed that 30 and 60-day timeframes had been included in the text of the memorandum, meaning the strait would not reopen immediately, but through a graduated process. Stage 3, a 30-day window for broader negotiations on a comprehensive agreement, extendable if needed. This is where the nuclear question lives. This is where ballistic missiles live. This is where proxy networks live. This is where frozen Iranian assets and reparations and the U.S. naval blockade's permanent lifting live. All of those questions, the questions that have defined the entire negotiating gap for 85 days, are being deferred to a 30-day window that has not yet opened, in a negotiation that has not yet been agreed to. between two countries that have each described the other's proposals as unacceptable as recently as this week. Fortune confirmed that Vice President J.D. Vance, Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner played significant roles in helping bridge remaining gaps from the American side. Qatar sent a senior official to Tehran to support Pakistan's mediation efforts alongside Munir. Marco Rubio told journalists in India on Saturday, "There's been some progress made, and there may be news later today." And then the news came. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell icon, because what comes next is the part of this story that every celebration of Trump's post is skipping over. The part about what Iran actually agreed to. The part about what Iran is still refusing. The part about what largely negotiated does not mean. And the part about Israel. The most important word in Trump's 6-word announcement is not negotiated. It is largely. Trump did not say the deal is finalized. He did not say it is signed. He did not say it is agreed. He said it is largely negotiated, subject to finalization. And within hours of that post, Iran's own state-affiliated media made it absolutely clear what the gaps are that largely is covering. Fars news agency, which is affiliated with the IRGC, meaning it reflects the Revolutionary Guard's position, not just the foreign ministry's, reported that the deal on the table would keep the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian management, and that Trump's assertion that the strait would simply be reopened was inconsistent with reality. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Baghai said that any mechanism concerning the Strait of Hormuz should be agreed between Iran, Oman, and the countries bordering the waterway, and that the United States has nothing to do with it. Iran's parliament speaker Ghalibaf, the man who has been Iran's chief negotiator throughout the entire conflict, said on Saturday, after meeting with Asim Munir, that Iran has rebuilt its military assets and that if Trump resumed attacks, the result would be more crushing and more bitter than at the start of the war. That is not the language of a country that has accepted American terms. That is the language of a country that is negotiating from a position it believes is stronger than it was 85 days ago. CNN reported that Iran's state-affiliated media disputed Trump's characterization of the deal, reporting that Hormuz will remain under Iranian control under the latest version of the proposal exchanged between the U.S. and Iran. And the Times of Israel captured the core contradiction in one sentence. Trump says the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened under the agreement. Iran's Fars news agency reports the agreement would allow Iran to manage the Strait of Hormuz. Two different descriptions of the same agreement, one from the President of the United States, one from the military organization that has been enforcing the closure, both issued on the same day, both describing the same document, and both descriptions are mutually inconsistent. That inconsistency, that gap between Trump saying Hormuz will be reopened and Iran saying Hormuz will remain under Iranian management, is the most important unresolved question in the entire framework. Because it is not a question about language. It is a question about sovereignty over the most important waterway in the world. The nuclear question is the other gap that largely is covering. Trump told CBS News in a separate interview on Saturday that he would only sign a deal where we get everything we want, including preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. He said the agreement would result in Iran's enriched uranium being satisfactorily handled. And he threatened to resume strikes against Iran if it does not come to agreement. We're going to have a situation where no country will ever be hit as hard as they're about to be hit, he told CBS. Those are not the words of a man who has already resolved the nuclear question. They are the words of a man who's announcing progress while still holding a threat in his other hand. PBS News confirmed the reality on the ground. The war's stated aims have not been achieved. Iran still has its enriched uranium and a missile program it says is being rebuilt. Iran's 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, the stockpile that the U.S. 5-point proposal demanded be transferred to Washington or the IAEA, is still in Iran. The centrifuges at Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo that the U.S. demanded be dismantled are still operating or can be restarted. And Iran's supreme leader's position, confirmed in multiple statements throughout the war, is that uranium enrichment is a non-negotiable national right. The MOU framework defers nuclear negotiations to a 30 to 60-day window. That window is not opened. The nuclear question has not been resolved. And a man who says he will only sign a deal where we get everything we want on nuclear issues has posted a 6-word announcement of a deal that defers nuclear issues to future negotiations. Those two things are simultaneously true. And the distance between them is the distance between a deal that ends this war and a deal that pauses it. Israel's reaction to Saturday's announcement adds a dimension that the Trump post deliberately did not address. The Times of Israel reported that there is significant concern in Israel over the terms of the deal, and that Netanyahu gathered coalition leaders and security chiefs on Saturday night to discuss it. Israel has its own position in this war, separate from America's. It was a co-belligerent from the first strike on February 28th. It has its own objectives. primarily the permanent dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program and the severing of Iran's relationships with Hezbollah and Hamas. A deal that defers nuclear negotiations to a 30-day window that can be extended is not the permanent dismantlement that Israel has been fighting for. Netanyahu told Trump in their Saturday call that the conversation went very well, but that diplomatic description covers a relationship that has had real tensions throughout the war, including reports that Israel was preparing unilateral strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in the week before the MOU breakthrough. Trump acknowledged separately in his post that his call with Netanyahu was separately held, meaning Netanyahu was not on the same call as the Gulf leaders, a detail that tells you something about how the coalition dynamics are being managed at this final stage of the negotiations. The role that Pakistan played in producing this outcome deserves more recognition than it is receiving in the coverage of Trump's announcement. Pakistan has been the indispensable intermediary in every phase of this diplomacy. It organized the April 8th ceasefire, it hosted the Islamabad talks, it delivered every proposal in both directions. Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi made 2 trips to Tehran in 1 week. Army Chief Asim Munir made the visit that produced the breakthrough, meeting with Pezeshkian, Arakchi, Ghalibaf, IRGC Commander Vahidi, and other senior officials in the days immediately preceding Trump's announcement. Reuters reported that Pakistani sources said Munir's visit made significant progress. The Pakistani army described negotiations as producing encouraging results, and Trump explicitly named Pakistan in his Truth Social post, saying he had spoken with Pakistan's leadership as part of the calls that preceded the announcement, a country that is absorbing $500 million per month in additional oil import costs from this war, that has tripled its monthly fuel bill, that has been mediating while its own economy bled, that sent its army chief to sit across from the IRGC commander to carry an American proposal and return with an Iranian signal. That country is the reason 6 words appeared on Truth Social on Saturday evening. Pakistan's diplomacy is the architecture beneath the announcement that Trump is presenting as his own. The economic consequences of the announcement began registering in global markets before the announcement was even formally made. Rubio's words to journalists in India, "There's been some progress made, and there may be news later today," were enough to start moving oil prices before Trump posted. The reason oil markets respond to partial signals from a Secretary of State talking to journalists in India is that the Hormuz closure has been the single largest supply shock in the history of the global oil market. The IEA called it the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Brent crude surged 60% from pre-war levels at its peak, reaching approximately $120 per barrel in March. The Dallas Federal Reserve calculated that the closure lowered global real GDP growth by an annualized 9 percentage points. Gas prices in the United States rose 27% from below $3 per gallon to above $4 nationally, with Los Angeles stations exceeding $8. Spirit Airlines shut down entirely. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on its LNG contracts after the Ras Laffan attack. The Philippines declared a national energy emergency. Japan's trade deficit widened dramatically. South Korea's KOSPI triggered circuit breakers. Pakistan's oil import bill nearly tripled. When the announcement came that an agreement was largely negotiated and that Hormuz would reopen, every one of those economic pressure points began to recalibrate. Not reverse immediately. The MOU is not yet signed. The Hormuz reopening has graduated over 30 to 60 days, and the 30-day broader negotiations window has not opened. But the direction of travel changed in a single evening. The ceiling on oil prices came down the moment the 6 words were posted. And the question every energy market is now pricing is not whether Hormuz reopens, but how quickly and on whose terms. So here is the full picture on May 24th, 2026. Trump posted, "An agreement has been largely negotiated," on Truth Social on Saturday, May 23rd. He said the deal includes opening the Strait of Hormuz. He said final details will be announced shortly. He had spoken with leaders of 9 countries, plus Netanyahu. Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir left Tehran on Saturday after meetings that produced encouraging progress in narrowing differences. The deal structure confirmed by Reuters is a 3-stage MOU. End the war, resolve Hormuz through a graduated mechanism, then 30 to 60 days of broader negotiations. Iran's Fars news agency disputed that Hormuz would simply reopen, saying it would remain under Iranian management. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed an MOU is being finalized but has not been signed. Trump told CBS he would only sign a deal where America gets everything it wants on nuclear issues. Iran still has 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. Iran's parliament speaker said Iran has rebuilt its military and resumed attacks would be more crushing. Israel gathered security chiefs Saturday night over concerns about the deal's terms. J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner helped bridge gaps from the American side. Qatar sent a senior official to Tehran. Pakistan's army described encouraging progress after Munir's visit. 2 Pakistani sources said the deal is fairly comprehensive to terminate the war. And the world is waiting, in the next 3 to 4 days, according to Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, for the finalization of an MOU that both sides still describe with different words, that still defers nuclear questions to a future window, and that represents the closest thing to the end of this 85-day war that has existed since the first strike on February 28th. 6 words. 11 minutes of reading time. And the most consequential diplomatic moment of 2026, still subject to finalization, still carrying a word that matters more than all the others, largely. If this video gave you the full picture behind the 6 words, subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell icon for daily verified updates. Comment below. Do you think the deal will be fully signed within the next 72 hours, or will the gap between Trump's Hormuz will be opened and Iran's Hormuz will be managed by us sink the agreement at the final stage? Every comment gets read. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we will see you tomorrow.